Good evening, everyone. The Ranter is back to go in yet another rambling diatribe of the news of the day. And gee, what the news of the day would be. Well, that would be the news that came yesterday. Now, I was initially going to be doing a Ranter's video, which was inspired by a live stream that Vin and Sori did from Middle America, where it was an Ask Him Anything thing, but it turned out to be just a thing about the Canadian trucker issue and the protests and how Trudeau's response to that is universally, I think we all agree, no matter what side of the aisle we are, that has gone way too far for the actual particular issue involved, without any justifiable evidence that is being provided to make us understand why he's taking the steps he's taking. And so I was going to do a video, which was inspired by that, talking about how no matter what political party you're in, left, right, or center, that people who get to that level, as in presidential level, when situations come up, they do take things a bit too far in them. And I was going to cite various examples and go back a while until we get up to here. So that Justin Trudeau's actions is not an aberration, but something that has been part of this escalation of our political discourse that has only been cresting higher and higher and higher. But I'm not going to do that now. No, because as of yesterday, that issue is going to take second page on this, so that's going to be done in another video. This is concerning what our friends in Russia were doing as they're going into Ukraine now. Now, on the live stream, I had quoted my favorite Aesop's quote, "A tyrant always finds a pretext for his tyranny." Now, what that generally means is that a tyrant does not just go and rush in without, explanation, without some kind of justification of what they're doing. They set up a reason. Now, a pretext. It says why we're going to do this, so therefore this is why we're in there. This is why, we're not invading, we're protecting, when it's really an invasion. It is 9 times out of 10 mostly bullshit, but it's something that we've heard of over and over again. And this is something that Vladimir Putin is doing. He gave himself a pretext to go in. And what was that pretext? Well, I will read to you that pretext. Before he gave the orders for the military to proceed to go into Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a statement concerning a number of regions in Ukraine and the intentions of not only what he was going to do with that, but demands that he had on NATO, the West, and the United States, and which all leads into what we have to deal with now. So this is coming from NPR as of Monday. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday recognized 2 regions in Ukraine as independent and ordered Russian troops to conduct peacekeeping operations there, raising fears that Russia is paving the way for an attack. The move set off a round of international condemnations and further isolation at the United Nations, sanctions from the United States, and a promise from the United Kingdom that it too would sanction Russia. The Biden administration announced the first round of limited economic sanctions, with more to follow Tuesday, which he did follow through with. Putin's declaration named 2 regions. Now, pardon me while I butcher the pronunciation. Luhansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic. Both are unrecognized territories carved out by Russian-backed separatists in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine after fighting broke out there against Ukrainian government forces in 2014. The announcement is a serious escalation that effectively kills the Minsk Accords, which set out a series of military and political steps designed to resolve the status of the two breakaway regions and end an 8-year-old conflict there. The United States Security Council held an emergency meeting Monday evening in response, where Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. representative to the UN, said Putin had torn the Minsk agreement to shreds and warned that Russia forces escalating further would create a devastating loss of life, and cause a refugee crisis across Europe. She warned that Putin's ambitions beyond Ukraine, that he has asserted Russian claims to all former territories of the former Russian Empire. Putin wants the world to travel back in time, to a time before the United Nations, she said, to a time when empires ruled the world, but the rest of the world has moved forward. It's not 1919, it is 2022. Russia's Vasily Nevensia, in turn accused Ukraine of aggressions and of shelling the civilians of the Donbass conflict, while Ukrainian Representative Sergei, I'm not even tempted because that would be rather insulting of me. The Ukrainian representative said the Russians' recognition of the regions was illegal and illegitimate. Negotiations is the only way to address existing differences, says Rosemary DiCarlo, the United Nations Chief Political Officer. We call on all relevant actors to focus their efforts on an immediate cessation of hostilities. The meeting adjourned without any collective statement or action. Speaking to his country's citizens earlier, Ukrainian President Zelensky said Putin's actions were a violation of the sovereign and territorial integrity of Ukraine. In highly staged meetings earlier Monday, Putin met with members of his Security Council who urged the president to take this action, citing Ukrainian I can't even pronounce that word. Saying that Ukrainian was messing up the Minsk Accord themselves. We'll say it like that. The Russian-backed rebel leaders of the self-proclaimed republics urged Putin earlier on Monday to recognize their independence and provide security guarantees. The U.S. has said Russia had amassed up to 190,000 troops on its border with Ukraine. President Biden will issue an executive order to prohibit new investment, trades, and finances by U.S. persons to, from, or in the so-called DNR and LNR regions of Ukraine, according to the statement from the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. The statement said that the order will allow for sanctions to be imposed on anyone violating the order, and that Departments of State and Treasury will share more details shortly. Psaki says the administration will have more announcements soon related to today's blatant violation of Russia's international commitments that are separate from the economic consequences to be imposed if Russia invades Ukraine. British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said the United Kingdom would announce on Tuesday its own sanctions on Russia for its breach of international law and attack on Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now the NATO countries promise sanctions. Biden and Zelensky held a 35-minute call Monday. The White House said that Biden also convened with a call with the French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Poor you having to listen to this. Scholz and Macron also spoke with Putin on Monday. Scholz says in a statement that he told Putin that any such move would amount to a one-sided breach of the Minsk agreements and urged Putin to pull Russian troops from the Ukrainian-Russian border. Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, called the recognition of the territories a blatant violation of international law, the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and the Minsk agreements. The European Union promised sanctions against those involved in this illegal act. United Kingdom Prime Minister Boris Johnson called Putin's announcement yet another indication that things are moving in the wrong direction in Ukraine. The UK will continue to do everything we can to stand by the people of Ukraine, he said, including preparing sanctions and fortifying NATO's eastern flank. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres considers Russia's decision to be a violation of the integrity territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. According to the UN statement, Guterres urges all parties to focus on cessation of hostilities, protecting the civilians, and continued diplomacy. Russia has claimed that the situation along the contact line in Donbass has been deteriorating in recent days, and Putin has said that Ukraine is committing a genocide there, that him sending in troops would be to supposedly save its people. The U.S. has described these claims as a false flag operation aimed at creating a pretext for an invasion. So, there's more to this, but I think we got the gist of this. The pretext is Putin's announcement of him recognizing these two regions in eastern Ukraine who were held by the separatists as being independent republics. You know, the DNR and the LNR, which is the abbreviations for them. Now, in the announcement, he also said that part of the treaties of this recognition of these two sovereign republics was that they requested Russian troops to enter their territory and allow them to build bases there. Now, this is one of those things where for the past few years, at least at the very least from 2014, Russia has been backing these separatists, infiltrating agents in it, giving them support. These territories are nothing more than puppet states. They're not even states, really. His recognition is not recognized by the rest of the world. And him just doing that is the pretext for him to send troops in. We have heard all week prior of Putin's amassing of his military ringing around Ukraine from the borders of Russia and Crimea, since he also has control over Crimea, which in his statement he also demanded that the UN recognizes that Crimea is part of Russia and not its own separate entity anymore. Now, why would he go into so much detail, so jump through so many hoops? Why did he dot all these I's and cross these T's? Why didn't he just slam his forces into Ukraine and take it over like people would have thought? Some people would have thought. He wouldn't. Being a leader of the KGB means you have intelligence and you have, for the rest of the world, the god-awful trait of having patience. People like going, well, this wouldn't have happened under Trump. No, probably not, because he wouldn't be ready for it. It takes a lot of effort and logistics to move that amount of troops to ring it around a border. I mean, there could have been a lot of times where invasion plans were drawn up and then called off, drawn up and called off, due to what was going on in the world at the time. And the weird thing is, we were hearing this for the past, week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe more, from our government telling everybody that this was coming down. Biden was telling us this was going to happen. It was going to happen immediately in a short period of time. So much so that right-wing media, when they did cover it, balked at Biden's claims that, yeah, it's going to happen immediately. Yeah, he said that, yeah. And then it happened. Which is an interesting point, is that while other news organizations were covering this as the world quality significant event in world history, Fox News was spending its time not talking about this because they didn't want to talk about this because too many of their talking heads on Fox News is too much of cheerleaders for Russia, that they needed to get their story straight before they even approach this topic. So they drudge up the Durham report, misrepresent what was said in there so they can have this juicy little story for the past week over Hillary Clinton spying on the White House, spying on the Trump campaign, when even the Durham report didn't really even say that. But they misinterpreted enough and threw out that red meat enough for people to chomp on it. The funny part on that little side tangent, and I talked about it in the last video, is how they talked about how that she was wiretapping and spying on the 2016 White House. Well, Trump wasn't in there yet. But, no one blamed Fox News to really be having that attention to detail. They wanted to throw out the buzzwords to get the ears perking up, and that's enough. Remember, this day and age of our political climate, saying something is enough. It's no longer required to even have facts or to prove or back what you're saying, because people will clap and they'll hit the buzzer and they'll nod their heads, because as long as you're saying something that is in line with their thinking, then then it has to be true because I thought that. Both sides do that. They can't just lump that on just the Fox. Both sides do that. We're all adults. We can admit to that. Okay, good. So while Fox News was not even paying attention, or was paying attention but didn't want you to pay attention, Fox viewers, this was happening, this was cooking and percolating, and Putin made the announcement. Putin moved the troops in. You now have Russian troops in eastern Ukraine. And the reaction of this from our people in the media and our people in politics, depending on what side of the aisle you sit on, is a dazzling spray of contrary opinions. As now at Fox News, while they are forced to discuss this situation, they go from blaming Biden for some vague weakness in negotiations, or they're also praising Putin in doing this. Politicians like Marsha Blackburn does this asinine, ignorant tweet talking about the differences between Putin and Biden, and Putin didn't treat unvaccinated people as badly as Biden did. Oh yeah, no, yeah, Putin, yeah, true, okay, yeah. Putin also kills journalists and kills and or poisons political rivals or imprisons them. So what is your fucking point? And that goes to all these people who are praising Putin of his savvy, his genius. You're praising an autocrat who committed murder for years. You're comparing and contrasting him to Biden. Biden does a lot of things. He has a history. We have documented this in various places. Vin on Vin's story in Middle America does this. I have done this. We've talked about the busing in the 1970s. We talked about the crime bill in the 1990s. We even talked about, hell, in 2008, Biden's comment on Obama, how he was so clean and articulate. Yeah, that raises eyebrows for people. You know, that's like, really, man? Yeah, okay. But Biden hasn't killed any journalists. Biden hasn't killed any political rivals. I understand the need for certain people who are so beholden to their political thought process that they will sacrifice reality and common sense and personal integrity in order to serve their political master. But for God's sakes, people, really? Whatever you thought about the Republican Party that you probably grew up with, that even if you were a critic would at the time, but you still had respect for it, for people who have a difference of opinion, but their difference of opinion is fucking valid for their point of view as Americans, that Republican Party is gone. It is ash blown away in the wind now. So look at how many of these Republicans who are praising Putin, backing Putin, downplaying what Putin is doing, all the while denigrating our president because he's in the other party. And if you really are one of these people who go up there and just says, "Oh well, Trump was more tougher on Russia than anyone," first of all, fuck you. You are good. That is way beyond the pale of nowhere near logical reality. And secondly, Trump proved that in his own statement on this. Trump praised Putin's genius and savvy in this move to recognize these two separatist regions so they can move his troops in there. Brilliant. He said this in an interview. You can find it. This is not, offhand, some stray thing on Twitter. You can find this interview. I mean, do you want me to go through the actual words that he had said on this fucking video? Not video, but his interview. Let me go hunt it up. Here it is. From clayandbuck.com. When they interviewed him at Mar-a-Lago. Oh my God. In this interview, he continues about rigged elections because, he couldn't possibly have lost. We went through that, so we're not going to go through that. But, well, let's see. Buck asked him 24 hours ago that Russia had said that they are recognizing two breakaway regions in Ukraine, and now this White House is stating that it is an invasion. That is a strong word. What went wrong here? What has the current occupant of the Oval Office have done that could have done differently? Fuck off. President Trump, because they say President Trump. Well, what went wrong was a rigged election, and what went wrong is a candidate that shouldn't be there and a man that has no concept of what he's doing. Yeah, but you're no longer in the White House, so that's not you. I went in yesterday, there was a television screen, and I said, "This is genius! Putin declares a big portion of Ukraine. Putin declared it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful!" So Putin is now saying it's independent of a large section of Ukraine, I said. How smart is that? And he's gonna go in there and be a peacekeeper. That's strongest peace force. We could use that at the southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There are more army tanks I've ever seen. They're gonna keep peace, all right. No, but think of it. Here's a guy who's very savvy. I know him very well. Very, very well. I'm not going to go further into this bullshit. But his praise for Uncle Vlad and his genius. Yeah, a tyrant always finds a pretext for his tyranny. So tell me again how he was so tough on Russia. I seem to recall when we did put down sanctions on Russia for their interference in the election. We did put sanctions down on him. He couldn't veto it because the vote for it was veto proof. Both Republicans, Democrats backing it. And he signed it under duress. He didn't want to. But be that as it may. So he praises it. And so all the Trump minions are now praising it and bashing Biden for weakness or whatever the fuck. It makes me wonder what, for anyone who is on the middle ground here, who is neither a Biden supporter or a left supporter or a Trump supporter, just this middle ground person who's trying to go with common sense, trying to ascertain what is going on and trying to figure it out for themselves. What was the expectation, do you think, these people had on Biden? What was he going to do beyond the sanctions? Now, I can agree with some people on the right who are not flaming hair on fire over this and not trying to stab someone to death over this politically because they just want to do that to appease the master. But, actual smart, thoughtful, political conservative people who say that the sanctions were not tough enough. I can kind of agree with that. But the thing is that what were you wanting him to do more, and what would he be capable of doing more? Lindsey Graham spent a lot of time on Twitter talking about we need to put tougher sanctions on them, we need to crush them with sanctions. And my response to that is, yeah, I can agree with that, Lindsey. I'll agree with you with that. There's a rare time I'll agree with you. However, my question to you is, would your party support it? Because I can tell you we can have a lot of names that shown up here. Some of them are Republican senators like Marsha Blackburn, who are praising Putin, or at least downplaying what Putin is doing and doing this compare and contrast thing with Biden. So, will we see coming out of the Congress, from the Senate and the Congress, a harsh sanction package? Or are we too busy, farting around about, I'll truly hope we start our own Canadian trucker thing in D.C. to gridlock D.C. Yeah, it's a joke in and of itself. We'll get to that later. Now, so Biden had limited sanctions start on Monday. He's announced more on Tuesday. The UK has now announced theirs on Tuesday. Germany's going to come in with theirs. France is going to come in with theirs. Japan has an independent sanction on its own on Russia now. So the financial belt of trade is being tightened as we speak. Here's the thing. In the concept and in the world of sanctions, it's not a matter that we need to sanction them to the point where it is very difficult for them to buy a can of beans. We need it to be very difficult for them to fuel their tanks, fuel their MiGs. Now, it's very difficult to ascertain what is going on a hour-by-hour basis is what is going on in these two regions where these Russian troops are moving in. There is a YouTuber who is an Estonian soldier who is posting live feeds, updates of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where he scours as much of the media he could from all the angles, including video clips and so forth of shellings. Military actions that are happening. They're not just moving their way through. The things that maybe our U.S. media, and certainly RT's media, is not going to be covering. We have, people who have been warning us in our intelligence community, and people who have been serving in these capacities overseas. There was a lady who went on Fox News, who's one of their correspondents, who after 2 nights of when she came on, she had to hear the Fox News gerbils talk about how Biden this or Biden that, and he said they were going to attack immediately. They didn't attack immediately, did they? And their own correspondent crushed them with it. Crushed them that she has experience. She was there. She's dealt with Putin. There are things that happens. Logistics like this does take time. And all the indications that she saw was going to happen. None of these people at Fox News had a response to her. I'm sure it was like, well, I thought she was going to agree with us, so we better cut to commercial. It is so hard to get to be in this middle ground when it comes to media like this. I mean, there are people who are out there who do podcasts who just want to shit on all establishment media, and they have a right to. I mean, as it is, one of my favorite my favorite philosophies that come from George Carlin is to question everything. Always question, and I agree with that. But where I take that point is question in the vein of wanting to get answers. Because there's plenty of people who question, who just wants to question in terms of drawing doubt, sowing seeds of doubt. Because that's misinformation and that's disinformation. Because if you're going in there already not believing the source, and you question them, whatever they say, you're not going to buy anyway, so you're going to mock it or show derision of it. We who do this, I mean, me, my little blip show here, but people like Vin from Vin and Sorry, who does Middle America, when he does the live streams or when he does reporting like this, he's not going from one source. He cross-references from source to source to source, so that, no matter where you're getting the information from, either, left-wing media, right-wing media, if it's the same information, you can glean the middle ground where the actual facts are, as opposed to, getting from one side and getting their slant, going the other side and getting their slant, but you can decide for yourself where the truth lies in it, or the facts lie in it, because truth, at this point, facts trumps truth. Coin a phrase. And people want to, give Putin so much praise and how amazing this was, his genius, as Trump put it. And no, he didn't go in there right away. He didn't invade them, as they're claiming. Yeah, he invaded. There's not violence in the street. Yes, there are. You just have to look for it, but it's there. The thing is that what Putin did is proficient, and it's working for him, but it's not new. I think people forget our history, or at least world history. Take Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, prior to World War II, didn't just blitzkrieg their way across their borders and slam into their neighbors and annex the first territories by force. No. Before Neville Chamberlain came along and said, I think we have peace in our time, was after Hitler had already gobbled up the Rhineland and the Sudetenland. And how he did this without a military response from the rest of the world at that time was that he laid out a pretext claiming that the people in the Rhineland, was wanting to reunite with their fellow German speakers. That the people in the hills and the mountains of the Suderland were German speakers wanting to come home to be a part of the fatherland. And people and governments who were so weary of World War I didn't want to get into another conflict that immediately. And they listened to this bullshit. Whether there was any kernels of truth of there being people in these lands that were wanting to be a part of Germany because they're German speakers, that is immaterial compared to all the other people that was subjugated due to this aggression. And Germany walked in and grabbed the land, annexed it into Germany, then the next land, and then the next land. And after 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these events, the rest of the world started to pay attention and go, well, gee, maybe we should, stop them there. And that's when the Blitzkrieg started. That's when the tanks really started rolling into Poland and really started rolling into France and into Greece, into all these other places. Because a tyrant always finds a pretext for their tyranny. I'm not going to go too much longer on this particular topic, because we're now at the point where we're going to be watching this day by day, for those who are going to want to be paying attention to this. The political fallout in our country over this is disgusting. And how people are trying to not even give a shit about what is actually happening, but want to score their points to appease their beloved master. Because they still fear for losing his base, which is now their base. Anyone who claims themselves a Reagan Republican, if they're not dead from old age, they themselves will be rolling in their grave. But anyone who's alive calls themselves a Reagan Republican and they are agreeing with this bullshit, do not have the integrity to even claim that they were. As a Cold War kid, someone who grew up through the 80s, became politically aware in the mid-90s, I remember how gung-ho Republicans were. How revered Reagan was when he told Gorbachev to tear down this wall, the Berlin Wall. How we won the Cold War by essentially outspending the Russians, outspending the Soviet Union in their military buildup until they no longer had enough sustainable resources for the rest of their rather large country. So things collapsed because of it. Without nary a shot fired. Those Republicans would see Putin as somebody who, as a KGB strongman, would be the antithesis of someone that should be praised by anyone in this country, especially anyone who claims to be a Republican. How many Republicans over the decades prior to the 1980s who ran on political platforms claiming the Democrats were a little pink? And not pink meaning, sexuality or anything, but pink because they're pinko commies. They're socialists. Richard Nixon, in his bid for Congress, talked of his Democratic rival, a lady, that she was pink down to her underwear. Yeah, it was acceptable back then. The days of the House Un-Americans activities. I wonder what Joe McCarthy would think about this current crop of Republicans and these Republican pundits on Fox News. Then again, was there any real integrity that came from the House of Un-Americans activities? Outside of destroying people's careers, they've not found one communist back in the day. And here, this current troop of Republicans by name, and no, they're not rhinos because they're really Democrats underneath the skin. They're rhinos because they're no longer Republicans, period. This is not the GOP. This is the TOP. This is the Trump old party. It's like, CPAC. The running thing now is that people in CPAC apparently admitted, I don't know in passing if they were serious or not, that they're no longer conservative. No shit! So, we're going to see how the media on the left and the right responds to this. And to flip the coin onto the left side of this, into this issue, because I want to try to be somewhat fair in this. I am one of these people that do want to have a sort of a wait and see before we start giving out the grim determinations that this is going to lead to World War III, which a lot of these pundits on the left side is claiming that we are going to walk into. It could happen. It could happen. But the thing is, and this is one of these problems that I've been having with our today's version of politics, is that we are making moves, making statements, and even running on it, and fundraising on hypothesis and assumptions, without going into the actual basis of fact. Now, a lot of these experts, especially those in the intelligence community, do have experience and fact on their side that can make the intelligent assumption, we'll say, on what is the next steps of all this. However, that cannot be a basis alone to say, oh, well, we're going to go into World War III. That's it. That's it. Belarus is allowing Russians to park missiles in their country while they conduct military training exercises between the two countries. This is a scary time. But it's only a scary time for those who are paying attention. I mean, we do have, I don't know what you would call it. We do have a segment of the population who, a rather large segment of the population, admittedly, who don't read beyond the headlines, who's a little bit too lazy to really go into an issue longer than 5 minutes. The type of people who will read the book, they get the highlighter out to find the root words, and that's as far as they will go on their education in any subject. And everything else is just background noise and filler, but these few lines is all that matters, right? I'm not suggesting that, you should be glued to watching or reading up on every little thing that happens. Because right now, the major part of it happened. Russian boots are marching their way around. Russian treads are rolling along the roads of eastern Ukraine. That's happened. We're waiting for the next shoe to drop. But don't be waiting hour after hour for the next update. If you were interested, find enough news medias that is talking about the subject. Depending on your left-leaning or right-leaning, I've given my opinion on how certain behaviors of certain people are going on these shows to score their political points and stirring up bullshit. But there are still thoughtful people on the right. People who are old school Cold Warriors who still remember in the hazy mind of, back in the day when it was us versus the commies, as they would have put it, and sees the writing on the wall as much as any left-winger would do so as well. So pick, whenever you're going to read up, please cross-section it with other forms of media, whatever story you find, so that you can see a consensus in the story despite the slants left or right, or even an independent thought, because people of the independent podcaster community could be like taking any of this news and says, I don't believe any of it because of establishment news. Me. And they take it to that third rail. But if you're interested, look it up, speak out, think about it, be thoughtful. The ranter rants because the urge to rant is always rising. And I will be back on a video. I don't know if I'm going to record it tonight, but I will be back on a video concerning how political party and political power can go way too far in certain situations. So until then, stay safe, love each other, and when in doubt, play some D&D. Hello again. Apparently, as I was thinking about it, I'm not quite done yet. So, yeah, this is a rant. And sometimes rants don't have timetables or coherence. And just flying off in the mental ethers of consciousness. Now, I wanted to point something out during that Trump interview of how he said to the effect that we should have had that on the southern border. Now, when you break that down, what was he trying to say there? Because what Putin is doing is that he recognized two puppet states whose only purpose of creating them as puppet states, as these republics, to break away from Ukraine, was so that he could have the justification to move his troops into Ukraine to further his aggression. Alright? That's what he's doing. We're adults. That is what he's doing. But Trump says, oh, we should have had that at the southern border. We should have that at the southern border. So what is he suggesting? That we should prop up some, Mexican separatist entities in the northern part of Mexico? Recognize them as independent, sovereign Mexican states away from Mexico? And then, in order to facilitate protecting these independent, sovereign Mexican states, is we send our troops down to occupy said Mexican states? So, see how that goes? And how ridiculous that sounds? Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's just for me at this point, for me going on this, but this is the reality we are living in, where you have half the country's political power that is backing and demanding the support of the people to support a moron like Trump. All these people who had, serious political careers before Trump came along, who a lot of them were opposed to Trump until Trump won, and then they bent the knee and kissed the ring, and now they're cheerleaders for him. They line up to bash Biden for weakness of negotiating the sanctions, where, as I said a few minutes ago on the other part of this video, that I wonder if the Republican Party would even back sanctions against Russia at this juncture. Because that's the thing. whatever you say on Twitter, whatever you say on an interview, that's great. And as I said before, saying it is enough for a lot of people, apparently. But if Biden or the Democratic Party in the Senate put together a harsh sanctions package representing the United States in the United States to bring our fists down in sanctions against Russia, would they, where half of these people just went on Twitter to praise Putin and to denigrate Biden for his weakness, would they sign on to it? Or would they oppose it because their politics is more important? That is the question. This is not going to be a long, extended video here. But that is the question. Now, one of the things I can understand as to why we're not so eager to, do as much as we can to help Ukraine, or at least we're not putting the maximum effort into it, because we got ourselves out of a war that lasted over 20 years. A war that gradually became more and more unpopular as the years went by, and after the death of Osama bin Laden, and how for some reason we just had to go into Iraq, which extended our stay in Afghanistan further because resources were taken from Afghanistan to Iraq for this little pet project of Bush at the time. And then that became a quagmire. Afghanistan became a quagmire. And to the point where 10 years, 15 years after the fact, the question becomes difficult as to why we are there. What is the military objective of us being there? Because that answer becomes complicated and tends to change depending who's the person you're asking. So we didn't want to go back into that. And people blame Biden on how the manner of us retreating happened. I said in previous videos that was a shit show. It was going to be a shit show no matter who was president, who gave the orders, and when they left. That was going to happen. And it did. But got us out. Something that the previous presidents from Obama and Trump did not do. But that leaves us a very bad taste in our mouths if we ever even consider of us trying to go into any military engagement again, especially if it's something that is not directly involving us at the time. That may change in the future if we become directly threatened, later on down the road, because all this is just one little step at a time. If you ever play Stratego, you move one piece on the battle board. Yeah, it's just one piece. You move that one forward, they move one forward, you take a piece, they take a piece, etc., etc. The danger comes is when the game progresses where all the pieces that you moved gets into striking distance of the last defense. Right now, the piece in this particular Stratego game just got moved. The pieces of Russian military has been moved into Ukraine. That is worries propped up in Europe over, and the world. Doesn't directly affect us yet, but in the manner of how we respond to this may divert any more direct conflict with us. Or, conversely, whatever we do might exacerbate that eventuality. So, this is always going to be a delicate tap dance. And, I'm sorry for, going on this and sort of like doing a two-parter again. And hopefully I'm not going to have any computer issues last time around. Because the last time around, I remember for less, what, it was like 5 minutes of that video. And it's just sort of paused videoing, and then the audio kept going on, but then the audio stopped. So hopefully that won't happen. Knock on wood. But as I said previously, do look up as much as you can. Don't take everything at face value, but cross-reference whatever you learn if you want to be up to date on what's going on here. And it takes effort to do so. I mean, this is not a 5-minute thing. This is not, a fleeting, interest, and then you go off and do other things. If you really want to know what's going on with this, you have to put the work in, as we all do. And understanding requires that. If you're going to question in the vein of wanting answers. Not question for the sake of causing questions that doesn't get answered because you don't want the answers in the first place. If you don't agree with them. There's a lot of fallout that's going to be going on in our own country due to this. We already discussed that. So the next couple of days to the weeks, we will see how the media and the political punditry will ebb and flow on how they respond to this. We will see if we get congressional sanctions, how much of that's going to be supportive, because Biden's name is going to be on it, and we don't want to look like we're supporting Biden, even if that means not supporting the Ukrainians. In any event, alright, only 11 minutes. Ranter rants, the urge rant writing. That urge came back for me to do this another 10 minutes of this. So I will see you the next time on the other video that I was going to do about political power, etc., etc. Bye.